Chapter 25, 1 January, Holly's Diary. From the Diary of Holly Potter, 1 January 2012, Happy New Year to me, if it makes sense to write that. Hermione's back tonight. It seems kind of strange to have the train running on New Year's, but I guess they had to with it falling on a Sunday. It'll be nice to see her again, even if she'll be mad that we didn't find Nicholas Flamel while she was gone. She'll probably be mad about us sneaking around after curfew, too. I think Ron was right about the Mirror of Erist, and Dumbledore, too. I've had nightmares every night since I talked to Dumbledore. Always the same, too. The flash of green light and the high, cold laugh. Except it's worse now. It used to be I'd only hear it, but now since I saw them in the mirror, I've started seeing my parents disappearing into the green light. Even my real dad, even though he's alive. I told Ron, but all he said was, "You see, Dumbledore was right. That mirror could drive you mad." I'm not sure what I was hoping he'd say, honestly, and it still feels too quiet in here, at least in my dorm room. It's not as bad now that I've been hanging out with Ron again, though. And of course, I wrote before I went back to tea at Hagrid's on Friday. Christmas Day at Hogwarts was still great fun, but I'll be happier going home with my dad next year, if I can. The end of Christmas holidays hasn't been as fun as the beginning. I'm almost glad classes are starting again soon. I am glad Quidditch practice is starting again soon. Chapter 26, 3 January, Letter from Holly Potter. Letter delivered to Stark Tower by Owl Post, Tuesday, 3 January 2012. Dear Mr. Stark, thank you so much for the photos of my mum and my grandparents. My aunt never kept any photos of her or anything. Apparently, she hated her. Aunt Petunia hated my mum, and thank you for the DNA kit. I didn't really understand how all that worked, and that makes it a lot simpler. I've sent my sample back with this letter. The school thing is complicated. Everything I've seen says it's legit, and it's the same school my mum and stepdad went to, and it's supposed to have good prospects. But I think it might not be listed under the name we use for it, and I can't really ask around today, seeing as it's Christmas, but I'll ask about it when classes start again and everyone's back. Yours sincerely, Holly Potter. P.S. My eyes are green. People who knew my mum in school say I have her eyes. Chapter 27, 3 January Roman 2, Paternity Test. Results of paternity test conducted at Stark Industries Clinic Laboratory, Tuesday, 3 January 2012. DNA test report for personal knowledge, only case Stark 117, child alleged father name Holly Potter Anthony Stark test, no. Stark 117, 1, Stark 2 locus pi allele sizes D3s, 1358 0.92, 1317, 1315, VWA 1.25 17, 18 18 20 D16s, 539 1.01, 11 9 11 CSF, 1 PO 0.78 10 12, 12 13 TPOX 0.978, 11 9 11 D8s, 11 79 0.78 13 14 13. Based on testing results obtained from analyses of the DNA loci listed, the probability of paternity is 94.2393, which is considered statistically inconclusive, being below a standard 95 threshold. This probability of paternity is calculated by comparing to an untested, unrelated, random individual of the Caucasian population. Assumes prior probability equals 0.5. Note, since the samples were not collected under a strict chain of custody by a third neutral party, and the laboratory cannot verify the origin of the samples, this test result may not be defensible in a court of law for the establishment of paternity and other legally required issues. The tested parties' names that may appear on this report have been provided by the client and cannot be verified. The laboratory assumes no responsibility for incorrect or misspelled patient information. Based on samples received from the tested parties whose identities cannot be independently verified, I, the undersigned laboratory director, declare the genetic data is correct as reported on 1,030,2012. Dr. Michael Chen. Chapter 28, 3 January Roman 3. Logs from Stark Tower, Clinic. Internal AV logs for Stark Tower, Clinic, Tuesday, 3 January 2012. Mr. Stark stares down at Dr. Michael Chen from beside his desk with an annoyed expression. The paternity test results are on Dr. Chen's desk. Mr. Stark, inconclusive. How can the test be inconclusive? Dr. Chen, I'm sorry, Mr. Stark, I don't know. I didn't even know the test could return that result. Mr. Stark, well, what could cause something like that? Dr. Chen throws up his hands in frustration. Dr. Chen, I have no idea. Pause. It could some kind of contamination, but that should be pretty obvious. Chromosomal abnormalities, maybe. Mr. Stark, only if there's one that doesn't have symptoms. Dr. Chen, triple X doesn't, but that would only show up in the amelogenin. Maybe a niece would just a sec. Dr. Chen grabs a calculator from his desk and inputs several numbers. Mr. Stark, except I don't have a brother. Dr. Chen, frankly, Mr. Stark, this is the point where I'd usually ask someone if they're certain about Thatake. This is a luck of the draw thing with chromosomes. Naively, a niece might have about a 1% chance of turning up that many alleles. But since I've never heard of that happening before, it's probably more complicated than that. The test designers would have thought of that, Mr. Stark, and I still don't have a brother. What about the untested, unrelated control? Is that just a statistical normal? Dr. Chen, yes, we're not really comparing with anything. That's just a baseline for similarity. Pause. It's possible it's just a coincidence. The paternity test isn't a strict 100. Usually it's as good as, but I've seen it return as low as 99.9998. Her father could be the one in a million who just happens to have alleles extremely similar to yours. Mr. Stark, annoyed, and her mother just happens to be a woman I slept with in the same month. That's too much of a coincidence. Dr. Chen, like I said, I didn't even know this could happen. But we do have an alternative method. We can run a full DNA sequence on the sample and compare it to yours. All the genes instead of just 20. Mr. Stark, how long will that take? Dr. Chen, we already did the PCR. We can run it overnight. Mr. Stark, good, do that. Call me when you get the results. Mr. Stark walks out of the clinic's lab. Chapter 29, 4 January. Logs from Stark Tower Clinic. Internal audio-video logs for Stark Tower Clinic, Wednesday, 4 January 2012. Mr. Stark enters the laboratory. Dr. Chen is present at his desk. He looks more nervous than he did the previous day. Mr. Stark, all right, Doc, full gene sequence. What have you got for me? Dr. Chen, well, Mr. Stark, if I could just ask you a few questions about the girl and her mother. Mr. Stark, annoyed. Doc, if you tell me the test was inconclusive again, Dr. Chen, I'm sorry, but I at least need more information about Mr. Chen. Just tell me the result. Dr. Chen, a sigh. The result is that the autosomal match to your genetic profile is 40, Mr. Stark. Pause. 40. It's supposed to be 50, right? Dr. Chen, that's the problem. Parents should always 50. Anything else can vary, but that's fixed. That's how genetics works. Now 40 is possible between siblings because it's a random draw which chromosome goes where. If she Mr. Stark, no, she's too young to be my sister. Dr. Chen, right. I suspected as much. But 40 is too high for a niece or half-sister unless the parents were closely related. Mr. Stark frowns in apparent thought with a growing expression of worry. After 13 seconds, he picks up a pen and a sheet of paper from Dr. Chen's desk and begins sketching out a rough pedigree chart. He draws lines in increasing frustration until he scribbles over the chart and slides it away. Mr. Stark, Jarvis, can you trace Lily Evans' family back to World War Roman II? Cross-reference to when Howard was over there. Jarvis, there is insufficient data to check all edge cases. However, none of Ms. Evans's ancestors were born at a time consistent with your father's visits to England. Nor Ms. Evans herself in his later years. Mr. Stark, to himself. Right. And we know she was Holly's motherham, sister half-sister niece double first cousin, but then who's the father? To Dr. Chen. It has to be Munless Shang on, Jarvis. Do you have my dad's DNA on file? Jarvis, yes, sir. Shall I release the data to Dr. Chen? Mr. Stark, yeah, go for it. Dr. Chen, you said she was too young to be your sister. Mr. Stark, if she was born naturally, if the super spies pulled something weirder than usual, I'm gonna have to have adequate fury. Dr. Chen, well, okay, Mr. Stark. I'll queue it up. If it's in a compatible format, I should be able to check right away. Silence for 5 minutes and 37 seconds, with the exception of occasional muttering from Mr. Stark and Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen downloads, formats, and compares the DNA sequences while Mr. Stark paces around the laboratory impatiently, at times poking at the equipment. Dr. Chen, Andon, Mr. Stark, what have you got, Doc? Dr. Chen, 20, she's not your sister. And grandparent scan have a range, but that still doesn't explain your results. Mr. Stark pauses in thought for 4 seconds, then flips his sheet of paper over and draws more pedigree charts on the backside. Transcriber's note. In order to achieve the measured genetic similarities while not being a child of Mr. Stark, at least one of Harley Potter's parents must be a parent, full sibling, or child to Mr. Stark, and the other parent must be a relative of the second degree to both Mr. Stark and Howard Stark. The former condition would require a child born to Howard and Maria Stark by surrogacy without Mr. Stark's knowledge. The latter condition is possible only for a double first cousin to Mr. Stark, which would require the existence of 2 previously undocumented family members who then had a child together. Mr. Stark. Yeah, it has to be me. Anything else, there'd an impossible family connection and outside intervention, so what does a 40 match mean? Dr. Chen. Honestly, I'm not sure. I checked her chromosomes. They're normal. And there wasn't sign of inbreeding in her genetic profile to start with. It's just that the numbers looked wrong. So if there's no way to construct that level of similarity with close relatives, the only other explanation I can think of is that you have some form of chimerism. Different genes in different cells of your body. We would never notice unless we tested those specific tissues, but if that happened, you could show up on a DNA test as your own brother. Mr. Stark, would that affect any of the past tests? Dr. Chen, number or technically yes, but they'd still flag you as a close relative. We wouldn't have completely missed anyone, Mr. Stark, but that would still only be a 25 match. Dr. Chen, unless there was sesquizygotic twinning involved. An egg cell divides before being fertilized and, in this case, fuses again afterwards. The chimeric cells would 75 similar, not 50, and then the paternity test would match. Now, admittedly, there's only been one case ever reported in humans. Even without the chimerism, no, it sounds like a long shot, Mr. Stark. But considering the alternatives, Mr. Stark. No, I get it. Close relatives who don't exist, no detectable inbreeding, the timeline being wrong, and the same woman I happen to meet the same month being very obviously the kid's mother. I'd sooner believe she was grown in a lab. Pause. No, that doesn't make sense either. Why would they go for 40 me when they could have 50? Dr. Chen. So I guess congratulations, it's a girl, Mr. Stark. Mr. Stark stumbles and slumps into a chair with a dazed expression. Transcriber's note. Harley Potter redesignated as Miss Potter, daughter of Mr. Stark. Chapter 30. 4 January Roman 2. Logs from Stark Tower, Penthouse. Internal audio-video logs for Stark Tower, Penthouse, Wednesday, 4 January 2012. Mr. Stark is sitting on the penthouse floor with his back to the rear wall, gazing out at the city with an unfocused expression. Held in his hand are the 3 letters Miss Potter has sent to him thus far, rolled together, and a copy of their genetic testing results. Hedwig is visible sitting on the corner of the bar. The male tube and harness have been removed from her, but are sitting beside her on the bar. The elevator opens, and Ms. Potts enters the penthouse at a brisk pace. She looks around and spots Mr. Stark. She rushes over to him, kneeling beside him. Ms. Potts, Tony, what's wrong? Jarvis said you needed help. Mr. Stark looks at Ms. Potts in surprise, then looks up at the ceiling. Mr. Stark, of course he did. Thanks, J. Ms. Parts. Fearfully. Tony, what is it? Did something happen to Rhodey? Heavy metal poisoning again. Ms. Parts cuts herself off sharply when Mr. Stark shakes his head. Mr. Stark, Peppery have a kid. Ms. Parts, confused. Yow, you have a kid, Mr. Stark just got the test results back. Ms. Potts, you have a kid. Mr. Stark. Yeah, also Dr. Chen thinks I have some kind of 1 in a billion genetic chimerism, but Ms. Potts, emphatically. Yowhavakid. Mr. Stark regains a more typical attitude. Mr. Stark. Yes, I think we're established that, Pep. Ms. Potts, since Ewan. Mr. Stark. July 31st, 2000, apparently. Ms. Potts. Pause, angrily. You answered a paternity suit without consulting me. Mr. Stark, it wasn't a paternity suit. It was a letter from the kid. Ms. Potts. Pause. The kid sent you a letter. Mr. Stark nods. MS. Potts, what about the mother? Mr. Stark. Her mother's dead. 10 years ago. Ms. Potts. Oh, Ms. Potts slumps slightly and sits down on the floor next to Mr. Stark. Ms. Potts, okay, you have a daughter, and she sent you a letter and you already took a paternity test. What, did you already bring her here too? Ms. Potts looks around the penthouse. Analysis suggests a sarcastic attitude. Mr. Stark, hey, I wouldn't go that far without telling Yow. Besides, I can't right now. She's at a boarding school in nowhere, Scotland. Ms. Potts, Scotland. Boarding schoolery, didn't you leave something like this to me? I've handled all the other claims. Mr. Stark, the letter came while you were out for Thanksgiving. I didn't want to bother you. Ms. Potts, then why didn't you just leave it in my inbox? Mr. Stark, because it didn't come to your inbox. It came to the bedroom. Ms. Potts tenses with a worried expression. Ms. Potts, it was delivered to your bedroom. As in not just the penthouse, but your room. A room, Mr. Stark. Yeah, by that. Mr. Stark points at Hedwig. Ms. Potts looks over, sees Hedwig, and starts slightly in surprise. She stands up and begins approaching the bar cautiously. Ms. Potts, is that an owl? Mr. Stark stands and follows Ms. Potts. Mr. Stark, yep, her name is Hedwig. MS, Potts. Pause. The owl or your daughter? Mr. Stark, the owl. My daughter's name is Harley. Ms. Potts, right. And she can deliver letters like a carrier pigeon. Mr. Stark, like a very large carrier pigeon with razor-sharp talons and eyes that are always judging you. Hedwig, vocalization transcribed as prac. Ms. Potts, judging you, you mean. And she brought Harley, you said. She brought Harley's letter directly to our bedroom. Mr. Stark, to the window, yes. And no, I don't know how. That's one of the things I need to ask her about. Ms. Potts, so you haven't talked to her yet. Mr. Stark, I can talk to her. Her school doesn't allow phones or computers. MS. Potts turns around and stares at Mr. Stark incredulously. Mr. Stark, I know, it sounds crazy. She claims her school is so far out in the middle of nowhere that they can't get coverage. Their only communication is by radio, or Mr. Stark gestures at Hedwig. Mr. Stark, that's one of the other things I need to ask her about. Ms. Potts, so you can't actually communicate with her except by carrier all the way from Scotland. How did you even do a test? Mr. Stark, she mailed me a DNA sample. Even came up with the idea to do a mail-in test herself, and, well, even if everything else she said was a lie, the paternity test isn't. Mr. Stark holds up the documents in his hand. Ms. Potts, let me see that. Ms. Potts takes the handful of documents from Mr. Stark. She regards the roll of parchment with curiosity, but does not open it and sets it down on the bar. She opens the DNA test results and reads them. Ms. Potts, this says there's a 40 match, not 50. Mr. Stark, I know. Believe me, I went through all the possibilities with Dr. Chen. The only things that work require so many non-existent family members that Chen's explanation of chimerism makes more sense. Ms. Potts, chimerism. Mr. Stark, DNA weirdness, where I'm genetically my own brother, which is kind of uncomfortable to think about that way. But it works better than if I had a real brother walking around out there who I don't know about. Ms. Potts, oh, right. I think I heard about something like that on the Discovery Channel. Answer, Jarvis. Do you agree with this? Jarvis, yes, Ms. Potts. While the test results are unusual after considering all of the variables, that Mr. Stark is Miss Potter's father is statistically the most likely explanation. MS. Parts surprised. Potter, Mr. Stark. Coincidence far as I know. Unless you know something, Ms. Parts, no, we've never been Potters. Not since we came to America, at least Ms. Parts gives a heavy sigh. Mr. Stark walks behind the bar and sets out 2 glasses. MS. Parts, Tony, I think you'd better start at the beginning. Mr. Stark, well, on Halloween of 99 Ms. Parts, not that beginning, I can guess that part. Mr. Stark, oh right, drink. Mr. Stark holds up a bottle of bourbon. Ms. Parts, pause. Yeah, that sounds good right now. Mr. Stark begins pouring 2 drinks. Mr. Stark, so Saturday after Thanksgiving, the wise old owl Hedwig. Loud vocalization transcribed as Esri. Mr. Stark and Ms. Parts both startle. Mr. Stark spills some bourbon on the bar while he is pouring. Mr. Stark, I hate it when she does that. Sorry, the Weissingal shows up at the window with that tube on her back. Ms. Potts, hesitantly. Does it understand you? Mr. Stark finishes pouring, then wipes off the bar with a rag. Ms. Potts picks up her drink and takes a sip. Mr. Stark, sure seems like it. That's another one for the list. Anyway, after I made sure she wasn't carrying a pipe bomb, I let her in and found out she was carrying a letter for me. Ms. Potts, from your daughter. Mr. Stark. Yep, fancy parchment and everything. Mr. Stark takes a drink. MS. Potts picks up the roll of parchment and briefly examines it, but does not unroll it. Ms. Potts. Fancy parchment. Well, I haven't seen that before. Wait a minute. Halloween of 99. Wasn't that the one you got thrown out for pulling out a real lightsaber? Mr. Stark, why is everyone so hung up on the lightsaber? Ms. Potts, because that was the first mess I ever had to clean up for you. You don't just swing around a plasma torch like that, especially since Uriah, and people were worried it would cut like a real lightsaber. And then I show up to do damage control, and I find you taking some girl in a witch's costume up to Yoro, Mr. Stark. Yeah, that was Harley's mother. Ms. Potts takes a drink. Ms. Potts, and now her daughter, wrote to you back in November. Mr. Stark. Yep, Ms. Potts, and you wrote back. Mr. Stark. I would have just sent a form letter, but with all the weird stuff about her school, I needed more information. You know, where are you? Do you have a better way to talk to people? Are you in a cult? Can you do the paternity test at Christmas? Ms. Potts, skeptically. And Mr. Stark, and she couldn't. Not enough time to make the arrangements or something. But she came up with the obvious next step, do the test by mail. Ms. Potts, and you just got the results from that. Mr. Stark taps the DNA test result twice. Mr. Stark, I am now the proud father of an 11-year-old British girl I know next to nothing about. Mr. Stark pours a second drink and drinks it in one shot. Ms. Potts immediately removes the glass from his hand and sets it down on the bar. She nudges him by the arm to come out from behind the bar. Mr. Stark picks up Miss Potter's letters on the way. Ms. Potts leads him in the direction of the sofa. Ms. Potts, you don't know anything about her. I thought you would have had Jarvis dig up everything he could find on her. Mr. Stark, oh, I did that when I got the first letter. Jarvis, pull up the file on Harley. Mr. Stark pauses beside the penthouse's main holoscreen. The holoscreen displays the records that have been found to date for Miss Potter, centered around her school photo. Ms. Potts approaches the holoscreen and studies the photo. Ms. Potts, her, I can see the resemblance. Mr. Stark, really? I think she takes a lot more after her mother. Ms. Potts, she looks like you when you're trying to convince me that something's not bothering you. Ms. Potts looks back at Mr. Stark. Ms. Potts, yes, like that. Mr. Stark, pause. Okay, I probably deserve that. Anyway, the problem was there wasn't much to find, and what there was, it raised some red flags. Ms. Potts examines the photo more closely. Ms. Potts, that looks like a nasty scar. Mr. Stark, and that's not the only thing. Jarvis, bring up the records of Holly's mother and her family. The holoscreen displays the records that have been found for the Evans family, including all of Lily Potter's records, Petunia Dursley's records up until her marriage, and their parents' records. Mr. Stark, notice anything? Ms. Parts studies the spread of records. Ms. Parts, Lily's records are missing. Framage 11, her sisters look normal. Their parents look normal, Mr. Stark, but Lily disappears. No school records, no mentions in the newspaper, no photographs, no work history, no birth announcement for Harley. No obituary. There's an address, but no home title or rental contract. And the address doesn't exist. No car title, not even a TV license. And her husband's a complete ghost, barely anything but a birth certificate. Mr. Stark swipes through the files to display Miss Potter's records. Mr. Stark and Holly, she only turned 11 last summer, but look, no school enrollment this year, and the way she described her school didn't make any sense. Ms. Parts, so you think she's Mr. Stark, in a cult maybe, even though she said she wasn't when I asked her, or she's Amish. British Amish, whatever. It would explain most of except for why Lily started going to an Amish school when she was 11 when her sister didn't. And also she didn't strike me that way when I met her. Ms. Parts swipes the holoscreen back to Lily Potter's records. Ms. Parts, there's a diploma listed here. Mr. Stark, the school's closed. It's not where Harley's going, no, even though Chesedit was the same school her mother went to. But when I asked her where her school was and why it doesn't allow technology, she dodged the question. Mr. Stark holds up Miss Potter's letters. Miss Potts, you think she didn't want you to know? Mr. Stark, maybe, but I don't understand why. I mean, she has to know I'd find out eventually. Miss Potts shakes her head and leads Mr. Stark the rest of the way to the sofa. Ms. Potts, kids don't always act rationally, even yours. Pause. In fact, with your genes, I'd say especially as. Mr. Stark gives Ms. Potts an annoyed look. They both sit down on the sofa. Ms. Potts, so what are you going to do? Mr. Stark, what do you think? I'm gonna take her. Give her a normal life, Ms. Potts. You. Normal, Mr. Stark. Be a better father to her than mine was. Ms. Potts. Pause. What about the people she's living with now? Mr. Stark shakes his head and holds up the letters in his hand. Mr. Stark, you haven't seen her letters. She was practically begging me to take her away from her aunt and uncle, even offered tape rent. Ms. Potts looks sharply at Mr. Stark. Mr. Stark, like rent. With Munish said she inherited some from her stepfather. Ms. Potts, she offered to pay you. Ms. Potts looks back at Miss Potter's school photo. Analysis suggests she is studying the forced smile on Miss Potter's face. She then turns back to Mr. Stark and looks at Miss Potter's letters. Ms. Potts, do you mind if I see them? Mr. Stark, knock yourself out. This was the first one. Mr. Stark extracts Miss Potter's first letter from the roll and hands it to Miss Potts. Miss Potts unrolls it and begins reading. Miss Potts, Anthony Stark, Mr. Stark. Well, she didn't know I was the right Anthony Stark, did she? Miss Potts. Pause. I never thought of that. I wonder how many Anthony Starks there are. Jarvis. A complete tabulation of names in the United States Census is not public. However, a preliminary investigation suggests between 100 and 200, and it would be plausible that Miss Potter would not recognize Mr. Stark's middle name and birth date. Ms. Potts, which would also make it less ridiculous that she offered to pay you. Ms. Potts continues reading. Ms. Potts, what's this about post owls? Mr. Stark, no idea. I even had Jarvis go digging. No confirmed reports of people using owls to carry letters, especially not an organization. They'd have to be running it completely offline and not show up in anyone else's records. Ms. Potts, which would make the cult angle seem more likely. Mr. Stark, exactly. But then there's the problem of how Hedwig could find me without knowing I'm Thetae Stark. It feels like it has to be connected with whoever told her I'm her father somehow. Ms. Potts, how did she find out? Mr. Stark, Jarvis couldn't find anything on that either. I don't like it, Pepper. Pause. Here, this one came in mid-December. It's not much better. Mr. Stark hands Ms. Potts Miss Potter's second letter. Ms. Potts begins reading. Ms. Potts, I don't care if you bring a lot of women home. Tony, what did you tell her? Mr. Stark, I told her the truth. I didn't think she was mine, and I had good reason not to. I set her straight in my next letter. Ms. Potts scoffs and continues reading. MS. Potts, aghast. She doesn't even know what her mother looks like. Mr. Stark, The aunt and uncle. I told you it didn't look good. Mr. Stark hands MS. Parts Miss Potter's third letter. Miss Potts reads it. MS. Potts. Confused. Why did she tell you her eye color? Mr. Stark. Oh, in my last letter, I mentioned she looked like her mother, but I didn't know if they had the same eye color. Jarvis couldn't find any color photos of her. MS. Parts also now what? Mr. Stark. Now, I want to know what's going on with her. What school is she going to? Why is it so weird? Why didn't she want to tell me about it? How did they know I was her dad? Are they trying to stop her from contacting me? Ms. Potts, Tony. Mr. Stark stops and stares at Ms. Potts. Ms. Potts, the first thing you need to do is not scare her off. I don't know what's going on with Holly, but if her home life is as bad as you think it sounds like that school is the one good thing she has. You don't want her to think you're going to take that away without hearing her out first. Mr. Stark, deep breath. Fine, Ice, you're right if she's going to school at all. I'm not even sure how much to believe of what she wrote. In fact, I would have just thought she was trying to write a sob story for extra sympathy, except Ms. Potts, except for the lack of records. Ms. Potts pauses for 5 seconds, then places her hands on Mr. Stark's shoulders. Ms. Potts, Tarnarelia, are you okay with this? Mr. Stark pauses in thought for 8 seconds. Mr. Stark, honest Lino. Kind of freaking out right now, in fact. I have an 11-year-old daughter I've never met, and she might be in 3 or 4 different kinds of trouble that she's not telling me. I already didn't like the things I saw in her letters when I thought she wasn't mine, and now Mr. Stark and Ms. Potts are silent for 7 seconds. Then Ms. Potts makes a visible effort to relax back on the sofa. Ms. Potts, well, I can get started on the paperwork. Lawyers, NDAS, citizenship, passport. Get everything lined up for when she gets an official paternity test. Mr. Stark, and sort out that 40 thing. Ms. Potts, that too. I'll have Dr. Chen ready to witness. If Harley's aunt and uncle don't contest custody, we should be able to take care of it overnight. Mr. Stark, angrily. And if they do, I'll have adequate them. Ms. Potts, no, if they do, it will bury them in paperwork while you wait before you do something you can't take back. Mr. Stark, deep breath. You're the best, Pep. Mr. Stark kisses Ms. Potts. Ms. Potts, well, I had most of the stuff lined up in case one of the tests ever came back positive. Although foreign national wasn't high on my list. Mr. Stark, interrupting. Pepper, are you okay with this? Ms. Potts. Pause. Shaky Eno. I don't think I'm okay, Tony. I'm prepared. I always knew there was a decent chance this day would come. I've had everything lined up for us, but I'm not okay. Pause. But when you need help and you Willie'll be here for you. Because right now, there's an 11-year-old girl in Scotland who needs your help, and it sounds like even your parenting skills are miles better than what she's dealing with now. Mr. Stark. Hey, I'm not that bad, am I? Ms. Potts. I have parenting classes on the list. Mr. Stark, surprised. You're serious? Pause. Just to be clear, that's for me and not a threat Tausetham on me. Ms. Potts, yes, for you. That's a good idea, though. I could get tips on how to set your bedtime. Mr. Stark, a groan. I had to say it, didn't I? Pause. But really, Pep, thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. Ms. Potts, that makes 2 of us. Mr. Stark, so answer Holly's letter. Paperwork. Learn to parent. Ms. Potts, and you still have the race in Dubai next week. Mr. Stark, ah, crap. Can I cancel? Ms. Potts, you could, but people would ask questions. Mr. Stark, just tell them I'm being me. They'll believe it. Ms. Potts gives Mr. Stark a stern look. Ms. Potts, you know how Omar would react to you backing out. Mr. Stark, a sigh. Fine. Answer Holly's letter. Fly to Dubai. Kick Gee's ass. Paperwork and learn to parent. Piece of cake. Pause. Actually, there's one more thing you can do right away. Ms. Potts, of course. Mr. Stark, find an excuse to buy the company her uncle runs and do a full audit. If there's anything actionable, I want them dealt with before she even gets home from school. Chapter 31, 10 January. Article from the app. Article published by the Associated Press, Tuesday, 10 January 2012. Iron Man wins race against Global Incorporated, saves bystander Dubai app. A race between Tony Stark's Iron Man armor and prototype flying rigs built by Global Incorporate, GE, in Dubai Monday, ended with a victory for Iron Man. However, Stark's victory was marred by collateral damage that seriously endangered bystanders, requiring one of them to be saved by Stark himself. The damage caused by the race also caused GE's CEO Sheikh Omar bin Obeidallah Al Maktoum to call off a charity bet against Stark. The race was precipitated following the announcement of GE's next generation flying rigs in October. Tony Stark, president of Stark Industries, claimed on social media that his Iron Man technology could outfly GE's rigs. Omar disputed this in a press release, which escalated into a war of words that culminated in a charity race being scheduled for 9 January, with a course weaving around major landmarks in Dubai. At stake was an Eid 10 million, us 2.7 million, donation to the Maria Stark Foundation on Omar's part against a similar donation to the Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan Foundation on Stark's. The race was nearly derailed in December when Omar challenged Stark, double or nothing, to change the race to a 2-on-1 mark combat exercise in which any racer could win by tagging the others with training weapons. However, Stark immediately accepted the new terms, claiming, "Two racers only means twice as many ways to screw up," in a comment to reporters at Stark Tower in New York. The race began with GE's pilots, who have not been named, shadowing Stark closely and attempting to tag the Iron Man suit. Stark maintained his lead while evading their fire for over half the course length, but only narrowly. Near the end of the second sector, Stark performed an evasive loop around the skybridge of the Emirates Financial Towers. One of GE's pilots failed to match this maneuver and crashed through the skybridge. While the pilot was unharmed, a local businesswoman crossing the skybridge was thrown off the side by the crash, whereupon she was immediately caught by Stark. Stark, who afterwards stated he wished to avoid collateral damage, quickly ended the race by using an experimental non-lethal weapon to tie the two flying rigs together, causing them to crash into a nearby video wall owned by GE. Both pilots suffered minor injuries in the crash. Stark returned to the starting line with the rescued businesswoman and claimed victory. However, Omar called off his bet afterwards, claiming that the destroyed video wall was valued at more than the US $5.4 million at stake. Stark did not dispute the claim, and he immediately offered to pay for the video wall. Neither Omar nor Global Incorporated has made any official comment about the race. Independent observers noted that while Stark called GE's flying rigs second-rate and definitively won the mock combat, the rigs appeared to be equal to the Iron Man armor in speed and maneuverability, with GE's loss being attributable to pilot error. While Stark keeps the details of the Iron Man technology closely guarded, it is believed to make extensive use of computer-assisted piloting, which is not known to be implemented by any current competitor. To date, only Hammer Industries has attempted to put advanced autopilot into an Iron Man-style combat system, but its Hammer drones were sabotaged by the independent contractor who programmed them, leading to the attack on Stark Expo in 2010. The technical capabilities of GE's flying rigs have prompted speculation that more serious competition to the Iron Man technology may be on the horizon. The businesswoman Stark saved, who asked not to be named publicly, commented on Stark, saying, "He's nuts, and I don't envy whatever crazy woman agreed to be his girlfriend." When asked, she clarified that Stark informed her that he was already taken after catching her. Stark's girlfriend is well known as Stark Industries CEO Virginia Pepper Potts, who was elevated to the position from Stark's personal assistant in 2010 despite widespread accusations of nepotism. Analysts have since acknowledged her as a highly effective CEO. When asked about the race, Potts's only comment to reporters was, "Yes, that sounds like Tony." Tony Stark could not be reached for comment. Chapter 32, 17 January. Letter from Tony Stark. Letter delivered to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Tuesday, 17 January 2012. Dear Holly, the test was positive. I still don't know how you could have possibly known that, but yes, I am your father. That sounds crazy to me when I say it, but the numbers don't lie. Full disclosure, the test said you were a 40 match to my DNA instead of 50, but the doctor says that's on me. Some kind of rare, but harmless genetic chimerism. The match is too close for anyone else to be your dad. I feel like I should apologize to you for the things I said in my first letter. Pepper definitely thinks so. The truth is that back then, I wasn't interested in being a father or settling down generally, and by this point, I thought it had been long enough for any kids to come out of the woodwork. But I've straightened out my priorities since then, and a family may not be what I expected, but I'm willing to try it. Look, if I can level with you one more time, my relationship with my own dad wasn't great. Yeah, he tried in his own way, but we never really got along. Things were a lot better with my mom. So I can't tell you I know what I'm doing here because I don't, but I want to be a better father to you than mine was to me. And I'm definitely not going to make you pay rent. No kid should have to pay rent, and the fact that you even offered already tells me things I don't like about your aunt and uncle. Did they make you pay rent? Or was it some messed up child support trust fund thing? It better just be that. Otherwise, I'm going to have attic with them after we get the paperwork done. Come to think of it, I'd like to know how you got that scar on your forehead, too. And I'm not going to make you be the maid, either. Pepper tells me I shouldn't rule out assigning chores, but that's not really how we do things here. Jarvis handles a lot of it, and if we ever need extra help, I'll just hire somebody. Now, paperwork. If you really want to wait until June to do a legal test, and your school runs until then anyway, I guess we can do that. That's not how I'd handle it, but it'll give us more time to sort out the paperwork at least. I'll talk to the right people in advance so the 40 thing isn't a problem. Actually, it's good that we did the home test. It would have been a mess if we found out about that on the official one. So, I guess that means welcome to the Stark family. Congratulations. Not sure if there's much you need to know that you don't already. If you're wondering about any other family members you don't know about, it's just me and Pepper, my girlfriend. My parents died in a car crash in 1991. That's no secret. I'm still not expecting to find any more kids, and I don't have any other close relatives left. None close enough to worry about the DNA test, for sure. But now that we have that answer, I'm going to have a lot more questions, because whatever you've said about your school and your situation, there are a lot of things that don't really make sense. And not all of them are on you, but there are a lot of things I passed over before because I didn't expect it to reach this point. I figured it would eventually get passed along to someone who understood it, but since we've established I'm your dad now, I'm obligated to start looking closer. For starters, you said you heard from a reliable source that I'm your father. That's suspicious. If you just found out one day, that's one thing, but there's no good reason why someone would have already known and not told me first. I want to know exactly who this reliable source was. How did they know? How did you find out from them? Do you think they were keeping it from you for any reason? Do you have any idea why they didn't tell me? Pepper tells me that might sound paranoid, and maybe there's a good explanation for everything. Maybe she's right, but depending on the answers to those questions, I can easily think of nefarious reasons why someone would do those things, and it just doesn't make sense that I'd be the last one to know. If you think it's safe, and you have a way to talk to them, you can ask your reliable source about it directly. But if you have any reason to think they don't have your best interests at heart, you should wait on that one and tell me what you know first. Then there's Hedwig. Don't get me wrong, she's a good-looking bird, and better behaved than I expected. But she did something that shouldn't have been possible with your first letter, because I don't understand how she could have known how it deliver it to my bedroom window. Maybe you could train a bird to recognize the building, and maybe you could train a bird to fly from Scotland to New York and back. But I'm pretty sure she would have had to visit New York before to know where it is, and then there wouldn't be any point sending a letter. And there's no sign of Hedwig having any cybernetics or electronics that would let someone direct her from a distance. If you know how this post-owl thing works, or if you can ask someone about it, I want to know. Hedwig's fine if you want to keep sending letters with her, but it's a security issue if anyone or anything else can get in that way. And I'd still prefer something faster. And then besides the how, there's Thuhi. Why do you use owls to deliver letters at your school? Jarvis couldn't find any record of any organized group using owls to deliver letters. Why don't you use the normal post office, even if it takes longer because you're in a rural area? How do you even keep an owl as a pet? No matter how much Hedwig is well behaved, and also seems to weirdly understand me, they're wild animals, and that's generally not recommended. Speaking of which, you also said that if I knew what a post owl was, I would somehow know or be able to find out Warwara. I don't even know what you meant by that. I've looked at your records, and all I'm seeing is 11-year-old Holly Potter from Little Winging, Surrey. It's not that complicated. I don't see anything that would link owls to you being somehow famous, even locally. Or maybe you just made a mistake when you wrote that. Can you explain what you meant there? Then there's your school. You said you really enjoy it there, so I want to hear you out about it, but I can't ignore that there's something strange going on there too. First of all, can you at least give me some proof that your school exists? Letterhead, uniform pin, anything. Do you wear uniforms? I think that's a British school thing. I couldn't help noticing that you avoided the question when I asked you what your school is called and where it is. You said your mother and stepfather both went there, but Jarvis can't find any enrollment records for them, only diplomas, which say they graduated from Kiltarledy School in Inverness-shire, which supposedly closed in 2002, so it couldn't be the same one. You have to understand all that makes me suspicious about whether you're really attending school at all, especially with what you've said about your aunt and uncle. So I'll ask you straight. Are you really at boarding school right now? If you are, what is it called, whatever name you know it by? Where is it as accurately as you know it? Even the nearest town or what county it's in would be a good start. Or if you're not at school, or even if you are you in a situation where you need help? If you're homeschooled, and if your aunt and uncle or whoever are any good at it, that's fine. But if you're not able to go to school, or someone isn't letting you, I'll find a way to fix that immediately. If I assume you really are at a boarding school, there's still the problem that there's no sign of it being registered with the British government, not to mention the lack of technology. I may be biased, but that's not normal, and I already know you don't have any enrollment records for this year. That's not normal either, and it could cause you problems later. Even if you were homeschooled, that should be listed on file somewhere, and the school wasn't the only thing. I looked up your mother and stepfather, and neither of them had any work history. They had an address listed, but there was no deed for a house at that address, and also no house. With the lack of technology, I thought you might Amish, or the British equivalent, but your mother didn't strike me as the type when I met her, and Jarvis confirmed no one else in her family or any of their connections were. Her husband is practically a ghost, so it would actually explain a few things if he was from one of those communities. Maybe they could have an unregistered school somewhere, and maybe it would even have good prospects inside the community. But that wouldn't explain why your mother started going there at age 11 with no connections to them. Is your school Bruderhof or some other British Amish type school? If it is, does anyone there who knew your mom know why she went there? And whether it is or not, do you know why it's not registered with the government? And most importantly, do you feel safe there? I know you said you enjoy it, and I know you said it's not a cult, but from everything you've said, it still sounds sketchy. Are you sure you didn't miss any red flags? Can you speak your mind and question your teachers? Are there rules about talking to people outside the school? Do they use cruel and unusual punishments? Is your doctor really a faith healer? Are you secretly a Disney princess locked in a tower by an evil witch, and Hedwig is the only way you can get a message out? Now that I think about that, explain the parchment. Just give me something to work with here. If you need me to fly in and heroically save the day, I'll be there. Look, I hope this is all just a big misunderstanding, and there's a rational explanation for everything. Maybe it's a British Amish school. Maybe there are parts of Scotland with no cell coverage. I can send you a satellite phone if it's that. Maybe the Kiltarledy school being closed is related to the name confusion you mentioned. Maybe your mom's address was a typo. Maybe there was a fire at the courthouse. Maybe your mom ran away to join the circus when she was 11, and the circus also has a secret technique to train owls to fly across the ocean. If that's all this is, that's great. Well, I'd have to ask if you really want to be British Amish. If you made all that stuff up, I'm not mad. I'll be confused why you did, and even more confused about the owl thing, but I'm not mad. But I need to know the truth. I'm supposed to be looking out for you now, and I need some way to prove all this besides your letters. So if you have an explanation for all that, I want to hear it. And stay safe, especially if there's something to stay safe from. Love, Dad. P.S. Nope. Still sounds weird, but I'll get used to it. Chapter 33, 17 January Roman 2, Interlude, Ron. Ronald Weasley was just finishing his breakfast and steeling himself for the day's classes like any other day, when he noticed Harley go tense beside him. He looked around, wondering if Snape had come over or something, but he saw she was looking up, and he quickly spotted Hedwig winging her way toward them, a mail tube strapped to her back. Ron hadn't seen much of Hedwig since the start of the year. Harley didn't get much post, and several of those were apparently long overseas deliveries to her distant cousins in America. In fact, this was only the second time he had seen Hedwig fly in with a mail tube, although Harley had also mentioned getting a Christmas card from them. And she was later than usual. She'd come after the rest of the post-breakfast was just ending, and a few people were already filing out of the great hall. The rest of their housemates watched Harley with interest. She hadn't wanted to tell anyone about her last letter. She hadn't even told Ron and Hermione about it after she read it. Ron wanted to ask her, but Hermione insisted that he not. It was obviously private. Ron still wanted to ask, but he decided it wasn't worth upsetting both of his best friends. "Is it from your American cousins again?" Lavender asked. Harley nodded absently as she unstrapped the harness from Hedwig's back. "You never told us about their last letter. What are they like?" "Lavender," Hermione chided. "If Harley wants to keep it private, she's perfectly allowed." Harley gave Hermione a thankful little smile as she stood from the table, but Ron couldn't help staring. He thought she looked it off. She looked nervous, maybe even more nervous than last time. And Harley didn't look that way very often, at least when potions or Quidditch weren't involved, for different reasons. "Everything okay, Harley?" Ron asked. "Yes, she said awkwardly. "I need a minute." She hurried out of the great hall to whispers from the other tables. "Is she all right?" Seamus asked Hermione. "She seems fine to me," Hermione said. "I think I'd be nervous too if I found out my only living family was someone in America I'd never met, and I was trying to make a good impression on them with letters." The others considered that, and Neville nodded knowingly. "Yeah, I can get that," he said. However, Ron and Hermione looked at each other, and Ron tilted his head towards the doors. They both stood up, Ron grabbing a last slice of toast, and they followed her out of the great hall. Ron thought Harley might already be going up to Gryffindor Tower, but instead they found her standing in the corner of the entrance hall, mail tube still in one hand, a roll of parchment in the other, and her hands were shaking. "Harley," Hermione said with concern. "Ah!" Harley yelped. She jumped and spun around to see them, and she immediately scrunched the parchment up in her hand and stuffed it back in the mail tube. It had only been a couple minutes, but she already looked different, her eyes wider behind her glasses, her face paler, her hair coming out of place. Well, it was always doing that a bit. "Harley, what's wrong? Is it that bad?" Hermione said in alarm. Harley shook her head vigorously. "No, Eno, it's goody think it's good, it's just," she stammered, and she looked around the entrance hall at the attention she was starting to attract. Lowering her voice, she said, "I need to talk to you in private." "Okay," Ron said, also looking around. "Do you want to go up to the dorm? Could we go down to Hagrid's? Hagrid's, Ron said in surprise. Harley, we have class soon, Hermione started. She shook her head again. No, she said. We need to go to Hagrid's. But Harley, Hermione said. This thighs is more important, she hissed. Hermione gasped. Harley, we have to go to class. It can't be. It is, please, she said. Ron saw to his alarm that she was starting to cry. Harley, you're scaring me. What is it? Hermione pleaded. Come on, Hermione. Let's just go to Hagrid's. Ron cut her off. We have Binns first anyway. He won't even notice we're gone. Ron didn't have any idea what to do with a crying girl, but if she wanted to go to see Hagrid, that sounded like a good start. Hermione looked around the entrance hall worriedly, hopping on her tiptoes. Oh, all right, she said. But if we get caught, I'm blaming you, Ron. The three of them walked down to Hagrid's hut. Harley seemed to calm down with the walk, but she still looked out of sorts. Luckily, Hagrid had left breakfast before them, and also luckily, he hadn't gone out to start his groundskeeping duties yet, so he was able to answer the door when they knocked. Harley, Ron, Hermione, he said when he saw them. What are ye doing here? Ye aren't skipping class, are ye? But then he noticed Harley's face. Are ye all right? Do ye need to go to the hospital wing? No, Roman 2 just needed to talk, she said softly. Well, that can wait, can't it? Hagrid asked. I don't want ye get in trouble on my account. Harley held up the mail tube. It's about, she glanced back at her friends. It's about the thing at Gringotts. And in a snap, Ron was suddenly completely lost. You mean the break-in? He asked. No, the other thing at Gringotts. At that, Hagrid turned as serious as Ron had ever seen him, and he started ushering them inside. All right, come in, quick. Best if nobody else is seeing ye. Ron looked to Hermione for help, but she looked equally lost. But they all went inside. Ron and Hermione sat together in one of Hagrid's huge armchairs, while Harley sat in another. Hagrid himself sat heavily in his own chair. So, ye told 'em? Hagrid asked, motioning to Ron and Hermione. I was just about to, said Harley. I wanted to wait till I knew for sure. But ye found I am. Yeah, found who? Ron said. Harley took a deep breath. Last summer, Hagrid took me to Gringotts. The goblin said I needed identification to go to my vault. Identification, Ron said. You don't need identification at Gringotts. I mean you need your key. Harley did, Hagrid spoke up. Has to do with her Bane a celebrity, they said. Especially 'cause it was her first time. Took me by surprise too, mind. But they were worried someone might have disguised themselves as her and stole her key or something. Ron had never thought about that before. Gringotts never checked if you were who you said you were, only if you had your key. He thought Bill had mentioned the goblins could see through disguises, but if it was your first time there, maybe they wouldn't know what you looked like. Right, said Harley. So, I had to take an inheritance test to prove I was me. And it said James Potter wasn't my father. Ron felt his eyes go wide as the words registered, and Hermione gasped. James Potter wasn't her father. James Potter wasn't Harry Potter's father. How? He blurted, and immediately regretted it as Hermione shot him a dirty look. He knew how, of course. He wasn't that sheltered, despite his mother's best efforts. But the idea that it applied to Harley was unthinkable. Everyone knew the story of Harry Potter. Hermione knew the story of Harry Potter, and she was Muggle-born. But Hermione was already a step ahead of him because she turned back to Harley, who looked like she was trying to disappear into her seat, and said, But that means your real father, she said, wide-eyed. My real dad's alive, Harley said in a small voice. He's the one I've been writing to, not my cousins. I didn't even know there were Potters in America before Percy told me. Your dad's alive, Ron said, feeling more and more shocked by the minute. But of course he must be. If he wasn't involved after she was born, or so he guessed, there was no reason he would have died in the war, too. But still, it was so hard to imagine Harley having a family besides those awful muggles she talked about anyway. So Thenia, Mum, he said awkwardly. It was before they got married, she said quickly. My mum and stepdad got married only 6 months before I was born. We all thought Harley was just a surprise. Hagrid added. Lily and James friends, I mean. And I kind of was, Harley said. My dad was sure surprised when I wrote to him. But he's alive, though, Ron said. Who is he? She shook her head. He's a muggle, and he lives in New York. That's why it took Hedwig so long to reach him, she shrugged. His name is Anthony. So does that mean you're not really Potter, then? He asked. Could you not get into the vault? No, I mean, yes, I could get into the vault. I still inherited everything, and I guess I am still a Potter. My stepdad James, that each did a magical adoption after I was born. The goblins didn't know what kind, but it's supposed to make me a Potter magically. Harley finally opened the mail tube again and pulled out the letter, unscrunching it. Now that Ron saw it clearly, he didn't think it was parchment. It was too white, and it was in sheets, not a scroll, fastened together at the corner somehow. She scanned the first few lines. In fact, my dad said my DNA test came out looking funny. With these numbers, I think it gave me 10% of James' DNA, she said. Ron had no idea what DNA was, but he flinched when Hermione let out a gasp beside him, followed by a funny squeak. There's magic that can change your DNA, she said in a tone that sounded like someone talking about horrible dark magic. I guess so, Harley said apologetically, as if that were a perfectly normal question. I didn't actually know what it would do to my DNA, but there was a whole book about magical adoptions and relationships in the library. Hang on, what's DNA? Ron said, turning to Hermione. Hermione turned back to him in surprise, which quickly changed to exasperation. DNA is, well, it's what makes you. It's what causes traits to be passed down from parents to children, like your red hair or Holly's green eyes. If there's magic that could change that, it could make you look different, practically turn you into a different person if it did enough. And it would be passed on to your kids, too. Oh, you mean like blood curses, Ron said. Blood curses, Hermione said in confusion, then shouted, Wait, you mean they're Arithos kind of curses? Harley gave Hagrid a helpless look. Hagrid, she pleaded. All right, that's enough, 3, Hagrid said sternly. Blood curses aren't anything for ye to go looking into. For one, ye won't find anything about 'em outside the restricted section. For another, it's some really ugly stuff that you're better off not knowing about at your age. All ye need to know is they're not something ye can do just by waving your wand. Harley nodded. Yeah, the library book said even for just adoptions, it was a whole ritual thing, and with potions, too. Anyway, I didn't know if the adoption would do anything to my DNA. I still don't know what DNI is, though. Ron stopped her. It sounds like it's just blood stuff. Harley stopped and looked over at Hermione helplessly. It took about 5 minutes for Hermione to explain to Ron and Hagrid what DNA was to the point where they halfway understood. Harley tried to help, but Hermione knew more than she did. Hermione seemed oddly relieved that Ron knew what germs were. And while he had never actually heard of cells before, it made a kind of sense that if germs were made of them, then people could be too. But he was lost when they started talking about what they called chemistry, and he was mildly alarmed when not just Hermione, Butterly started rattling off facts about it that sounded like they could have come out of a potions textbook. Finally, they got across that DNA was this stuff that was inside your cells that, by means that Ron was ready to write off as muggle magic, caused you to look like your parents and a bunch of other stuff like that. And it was what things like pureblood were really talking about, even though wizards didn't know it. It then took another 5 minutes to convince Ron and Hagrid that, yes, muggles really did have an inheritance test that used DNA and was just as good as what they used at Gringotts. Well, Hermione claimed it was just as good. Hagrid had some questions, and Harley admitted that no, the muggle test wouldn't automatically know someone's name and birth date. You'd have to get a sort of muggle who sounded kind of like an aura to track the person down. And so, the paternity test said your dad was only 80% your dad, and James, your stepdad, was the other 20%, Hermione asked. I think that's what it means, Harley said. Of course, we don't have my stepdad's DNA to compare with. I guess it's possible my dad's doctor is right, and he has chimerism. A chimera, Hagrid said with a jolt. They don't have a them in the Muggle world, do they? No, Hagrid, it's a DNA thing, said Hermione. It's well, I'm not sure what it is, exactly. I'd have to ask my parents. But I think it's something to do with your DNA not always matching like it usually does. Ron was really hoping this wouldn't launch into another complicated thing about Muggle chemistry magic. Luckily for him, he remembered something more relevant. Harley, I've just thought, if your dad's a Muggle, that makes you a Muggle-born like Hermione. Harley's eyebrows shot up. What? That can't be. My mum was a witch. Nah, see, Muggle-born is about what your grandparents were, he explained, glad to finally be on ground he understood. If all four of your grandparents were Muggles, you're Muggle-born. That's what everyone says. Mind, most people won't care, but prats like Malfoy will. That's well, he lowered his voice. That was one of the things you know who was fighting about. He thought the purebloods were better than everybody else. Blimey, Hagrid exclaimed. I hadn't thought that, but he's right, Harley. Course, no decent sorts are wizards care about that blood nonsense, but it'd be an even bigger deal if you know, who got beat by a Muggle-born, 'cause he was all about blood. But I didn't do anything, Harley protested. It must have been something my parents did me, mum and stepdad, I mean. Oh well, I suppose so, he admitted. Still, your mum was Muggle-born, so I reckon it comes to the same thing. Harley just shook her head in confusion and went back to her letter. She had been stealing glances at the letter throughout their conversation. In fact, now she flipped a page over, and Ron saw it was filled with dense, printed text like in a book, and he thought there were 3 or 4 pages in all. It must be a long letter. And from the color, it looked like the Muggle paper in his dad's collection of Muggle stuff, which made sense if Harley's dad was a Muggle. Harley, Hermione said cautiously, can you tell us what he said? If you had to get a DNA test, did he not believe you when you wrote him the first time? No, he didn't, Harley said softly. Here said he used to bring a lot of women home. None of the tests were even positive before, so he didn't think mine would be either. Ron couldn't help but continue staring wide-eyed. He knew something of what kind of scandal that would cause, at least among folks like him, Mum, who, though he didn't have the words for it, was old-fashioned about that sort of thing. Hagrid seemed to agree because he grumbled loudly and said, Ruddy shame. I'd hoped ye could do better than someone like that. Did he at least accept ye when he saw the test? Oh, it's not that bad, Hagrid, she insisted. He said he's changed witchy, suppose. I don't know how honest he's being, but he has a steady girlfriend at least. He said he straightened out his priorities and, yes, he accepted the test. He said, she blinked back tears. He said he'd fly out at the end of term to do an official test. There's a bunch of legal stuff that has to be done in the Muggle world, she added by way of explanation. Well, that's a start, I suppose, Hagrid conceded. But if he ever gives ye trouble, just tell me, and I'll set him to rights just like I did your uncle, 'cause ye deserve better than that. Harley giggled a little and gave him a brittle smile. Thanks, Hagrid, she said. I don't think he'll be any trouble after he gets a load off you. Harley went back to reading her letter then, but she soon started frowning. Harley, Hermione asked, and when she didn't answer, she repeated, Harley, what is it? He's asking questions, she said. About Gringotts, I guess. How they knew he was my dad. And about Hedwig, she flipped another page, and Ron could see her eyes scanning down the letter faster. About Hogwarts, he already knew there were problems, or things that didn't look right anyway. He looked me up on the internet, I guess, and he found out I don't have enrollment records for this year. Ron only vaguely knew what an internet was from Dean Thomas, but Hermione was startled. She jumped off the chair saying, You don't have enrollment records. She hurried over to join Harley on her chair and looked at the letter. I guess not, Harley said, pointing to one spot on the page. But that means I don't have enrollment records either, Hermione wailed. Does that mean everyone thinks I'm not going? I need to write my parents. She jumped off Harley's chair and hurried to the door, But just then Hagrid said, "Whoa, hold on, Hermione. Are ye talking about Muggle school stuff? You'll want to talk to Professor McGonagall about that. She's in charge of that sort of thing, but you don't need to worry. Hogwarts takes care o' that sort of thing." "Oh," said Hermione. "Well, sort of," Harley said. "My dad says my mum and stepdad had diplomas, but they're for a school that's closed and there are no other records. He doesn't believe me that I'm going to the same school they did. Has worried I'm not going to school at all." Hermione suddenly jumped back on Harley's chair again for another look at the letter. "He thinks you're Amish," Hermione said in surprise after reading for a minute. "Or in a cult," Harley said. She flipped down the page to what seemed to be the last one. "He's really worried I'm in a cult, actually." "What's Amish?" asked Ron. "People in Americamagals in America who don't use Muggle technology," Hermione explained. "It's a religious thing. But I don't think we have them in Britain." "Bruderhof," Harley said. "That's what they call them here, or at least I assume that's why he asked about them. But Roman, too, don't know what to do about all of this." Hermione looked up and gave her a sympathetic look. "Well, you've got to tell him about magic, don't you?" she said. Harley suddenly looked very tense, and she started trembling again. "Roman too can't," she said. "He's going to have to find out eventually, Harley," she said. "I know, but how can I tell him now? He's acting suspicious everything. He's going to want to look everything up on the internet, and there's nothing to find there, is there? Or he just won't believe me to start with." "McCann, you send him something magical," Hermione suggested. "He'll be allowed to see it since he's your dad, or just tell Professor McGonagall. She's the one who told my parents." Harley shook her head at what Ron wasn't completely certain, but she seemed focused on the first question because she said, "It would have to fit in the male tuba chocolate frog cards, maybe. And I can see if I have anything else in my trunk." "Chocolate frog cards could work," Hermione said supportively. "You couldn't really replicate those with Muggle technology, I think. Not with real cardboard, anyway." Harley still didn't look happy. Hermione watched her sympathetically, but she seemed to be at a loss. Ron felt like he ought to say something, but he didn't know what to say. "What is it?" he finally asked. "It'll work, won't it?" "I hope it will," she said softly. "It's just," she sniffed. "What if he doesn't like magic?" "The Dursleys didn't," Hermione winced. "Oh, I doubt it'll be a problem, really. My parents are Muggles, and they understood at least." Even Ron could tell that sounded unconvincing. "What's that supposed to mean?" he said. "Well, it wasn't really about me, or even about magic. I think they were disappointed about Hogwarts." "Hogwarts? What's wrong with Hogwarts?" said Hagrid. "It's the best school of magic in the world, it is." "But that's just the thing, Hagrid. It's a magic school. I think my parents were unhappy that I wouldn't be getting a Muggle education. Hogwarts is great for magic, but it's not Muggle University track. But you shouldn't worry about that," she told Harley quickly. "Your dad sounds nice enough in his letter, and he definitely cares about you. If the Dursleys are half as bad as you said—" "Oh, they are." "I've seen 'em," Hagrid cut in darkly. "I'm sure they wouldn't have worried enough to ask ye about all that stuff." Harley sniffed again, but she looked a bit happier. "They wouldn't have written me at all, unless it was to say not interested." "Well, there ye go," he said. She gave him another weak smile. "Thanks, Hagrid," she said, and she held up her letter again, reading the last page. He didn't mention me living with him for the summer," she said to herself. "He was talking to you like a normal parent," Hermione said. "He probably thought it didn't need to be said," she said absently. She kept reading down the page, but suddenly she choked, and all of a sudden she finally started crying in earnest. "Harley," Hermione said. "What?" But she followed her gaze, looking back and forth between her face and the letter a couple times, and suddenly she gasped softly. "Oh, Harley," she said sadly, and she wrapped the smaller girl in a tight hug, and Harley began crying into her shoulder. The letter fell to the floor. "Harley," Hagrid said in alarm, "what's wrong?" But Hermione answered for her, It's nothing, Hagrid. She's just had a big shock. She'll be fine in a minute." "Do ye want to go up and see Madame Pomfrey?" he pressed. "She'll give ye a pass out our class." Harley shook her head, still hiding her face. I just need a minute, came a muffled voice. Hagrid sighed helplessly. Might be better if ye did, he said. Ye've already missed one class. It's best if ye don't miss any more, and ye don't need to get there all out us sorts like this. But Holly pulled away from Hermione and took a few deep breaths. I'm Archim, okay, Hagrid, not sounding all that convincing, but she'd stopped crying at least and was back to just sniffling. Ron picked up the letter, and he couldn't help reading the last page to try to see what had set Holly off. It had to have been something near the bottom, but he wasn't seeing it. All he saw was Holly's dad asking if she could give him a rational explanation for everything and telling her to stay safe. Not wanting to push it, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he handed the letter back to Holly. Hagrid still looked worried, but the girls begged off, and Hermione insisted she take care of Holly. Ron was as lost as ever, and Hagrid finally ushered them out so they could make it in time to their next class. It wasn't until they were halfway back to the castle, with Ron still thinking about how mad it was that Holly Potter had a family after all, that he figured out why Holly might have reacted so strongly to the letter, when he remembered the two short words just before the postscript. Love, Dad. Chapter 34, 22 January, Holly's Diary. From the diary of Holly Potter, 22 January, I sent my letter out to my dad today telling him about magic. I guess there's no turning back now. I really hope he's okay with magic like Hermione's parents were. I guess most Muggle-born families are okay with it. Dean said his mum was. I didn't tell him anything, but I asked him how his parents felt about it. I always knew I'd have to tell him sooner or later, but it's been so hard just getting him to believe he's my dad. And the magical adoption didn't help. He seemed okay in his last letter, but he had so many questions. I've just been so worried how he would take it. And there's still the bit where Americans are more religious than Brits, or that's what I've heard. If he goes to a church that thinks witchcraft is evil, I don't want them to try to exorcise me or something. That's one of the few things that might be worse than the Dursleys, but I had to tell him, and it was a long letter too. Ron was a little annoyed about it when he found out. He said Hermione will be on our cases to write more for our homework now. He might have a point about that, actually. I had to send my dad proof magic was real too because he was suspicious about everything, and I thought there was no way he'd believe it without proof. But I didn't have much that would fit in the mail tube. All I could find were some luminous, non-explodable balloons and chocolate frog cards, and the F-Whooper feather Quill Parvati gave me for Christmas. I hope that's enough. I never actually tried the balloons to see how they work, and you might be able to make moving pictures with Muggle technology. Maybe I still haven't told, maybe I should have just told, I guess, if my dad doesn't believe me about magic, I'll have to tell Professor McGonagall. I still wonder if I should have done that to start with. I know she could do it, and she has plenty of experience. But I don't know how hard it is for witches to cross the ocean on brooms or whatever, and classes are on right now. And I still don't really want to tell the teachers. I don't know why, I just don't. I'm not ready. It was hard enough to tell Ron and Hermione. I guess I want to make sure things between me and my dad are solid before I bring the teachers into it, if I can. But I don't know how I'll feel about it then. But the good news is I finally found Nicholas Flamel. I wanted to send my dad Dumbledore's chocolate frog card in particular, and Flamel was on it. Dumbledore worked with him on alchemy, apparently. I told Hermione, and she went and got a book on alchemy from the library, and she found him right away. It turns out the reason we couldn't find him in any modern history books is that he's over 600 years old. According to the book, Nicholas Flamel is the only person who knows how to make the Philosopher's Stone, which can turn lead into gold and also turn water into the elixir of life, which can make you immortal. I'm not sure how that works exactly. It can't just make you immortal after drinking it once, or else everyone would use it. I reckon you'd have to keep drinking it, but the book didn't say how often or anything like that. I guess if Flamel is the only one who makes it, he might not tell people that. But that means the thing Fluffy is guarding must be the Philosopher's Stone, and Snape wants to steal it because, well, how wouldn't want to steal it? Does that mean Snape tried to rob Gringotts too? That seems weird to think about. Snape's a git, but it's hard to imagine him as a bank robber. Well, maybe below is a doodle of a man with long, black hair and a large nose, wearing a black and white striped shirt and a domino mask, and holding a bag with a pound sign on it. Chapter 35, 27 January, Dumbledore's Notes. From the personal notes of Albus Dumbledore, kept in shorthand, file on Voldemort's followers, XREF, Harry Potter, XREF, Severus Snape, dated Friday, 27 January 2012. I spoke to Severus about Harley's upcoming Quidditch match, given the risk of another attempt on her life. I asked him to come the same day he taught her in class, so the matter would be fresh in his mind. But I fear that may have been a mistake for the same reason. Today was evidently a particularly trying class for him. I reminded Severus that the Quidditch match is 4 weeks from tomorrow. I informed him I wished for him to referee. Severus did not take well to the idea. He stated that he did not wish any more involvement with Harley than necessary, and that this assignment would only result in accusations of bias and would particularly alienate him from Minerva. I informed him that I would speak with Minerva on the matter. In my curiosity, I pressed Severus on why he found Harley so objectionable. His answer was quite revealing. It included the words mediocre, arrogant as her father, a determined rule-breaker, delighted to find herself famous, attention-seeking and impertinent. I stopped him at that point. I fear he may be deliberately dissociating Harley from her mother in his mind, finding it too painful given her similar appearance to Lily. But I find the comparison with James equally unfair. I believe Harley is well-tempered by Lily's character. I told Severus that he sees what he expects to see, and that I found Harley to be an engaging child. But I redirected the conversation immediately by asking him to keep an eye on Quirrell. He said, "I'm already doing that, Albus. Maybe you should start pulling your own weight." I informed him I would be attending the next match myself, so Quirrell will be less likely to try anything, but he would be better positioned to take action in the air. He was not impressed, but agreed to the assignment. I also asked him what he had determined about Quirrell, but he did little more than confirm my own hypotheses. Quirrell is almost certainly working for Voldemort, or else for another Death Eater who believes they can restart the movement by killing Harley. Neither of us believes Quirrell is capable of doing what he did on his own, even if his new personality is an act. And he is also not confident in his ability to bypass the protections on the Philosopher's Stone. Even so, I have taken additional steps to ensure Quirrell is not in a position to move against Harley when there is a risk of harming bystanders. The threat of intervention and the greater lure of the stone should keep him in line. I asked Severus to consider approaching Quirrell directly, though he was not enthused by that mission either. He said, "You realize, of course, that my options are limited. If Quirrell is working for the Dark Lord directly, I cannot afford to tip my hand, lest I be recruited into his plan." I told him I was confident in his ability to navigate the situation. He grudgingly said he would look for an opportunity to approach him. Note: consult Pensive for full conversation if needed. Chapter 36, 31 January, Logs from Stark Tower. Internal audio-video logs for Stark Tower, Penthouse, Tuesday, January 31, 2012. Mr. Stark and Ms. Potts enter the gallery room of the penthouse, having been alerted to a male arrival shortly after waking. Hedwig is visible standing on the drafting table, wearing the same male tube as in her previous visits. Transcriber's note: after receiving confirmation of Miss Potter's parentage, Mr. Stark programmed a new subroutine into the penthouse to open one of the panes of the gallery windows when Hedwig was seen arriving, so that she would not disturb him and Miss Potts in the bedroom. This was the first test of the new system, and it worked as intended, with Hedwig apparently willing to wait for Mr. Stark in the gallery. Mr. Stark approaches the drafting table and begins unfastening the mail tube from Hedwig's back. Mr. Stark, and now we'll see if Holly is willing to come cleaner if I'll have to dig deeper. Ms. Potts, gently dig deeper. Mr. Stark, I can be gentle. Ms. Potts gives Mr. Stark a skeptical look behind his back. Mr. Stark opens the mail tube and turns it over. A faint rustling sound is detected, but nothing falls out. Mr. Stark turns the tube back upright and looks into it. Ms. Potts, what is it? Mr. Stark, there's something wedged in here. Mr. Stark removes a bent pentagonal card from the tube and examines it. Mr. Stark, it's some kind of trading card. It's got a wizard on it. Mr. Stark drops the card on the table, removes a scroll from the tube, which is significantly thicker than Miss Potter's previous letters. He looks into the tube and turns it over again, shaking out 2 more items. Miss Potts picks up the card to study it closer. Mr. Stark, confused, a feather and balloons. Miss Potts, Tony, the picture's moving. Mr. Stark looks down at the card and his expression shifts to one of surprise. The photograph is not visible to the camera. Mr. Stark, that's weird. It doesn't look like e-paper. Ms. Potts, from what Holly said, her school wouldn't have e-paper. Mr. Stark, seriously. Yeah, that is strange. Let's see what she wrote. Mr. Stark holds up the scroll and lets it fall open. The bottom end of the scroll unrolls to the ground, bounces off Mr. Stark's feet, and continues to pool on the floor. 2 more typical-sized sheets of parchment fall out from near the top of the scroll, one with visible creases. Transcriber's note. The total length of the main scroll was 2.18 meters, 7 feet, 2 inches. The other 2 pieces were close to standard letter size, one of which had previously been folded to fit in an envelope. Mr. Stark. What? Chapter 37. 31 January Roman 2. Letter from Holly Potter. Letter delivered to Stark Tower by Owl Post. Tuesday, January 31, 2012, also included. A chocolate frog card of Albus Dumbledore, a pack of non-explodable luminous balloons, a neon pink F-Whooper feather quill, a Hogwarts acceptance letter for Holly Potter, a Gringotts inheritance test for Holly Potter. Dear Dad, I have so much stuff to tell you, and I hardly know where to start. To be honest, I've been worried about it from the beginning, but Hermione says I need to tell you right away. I guess the most important thing is that all that stuff you asked about, or most of it at least, has a logical explanation. But it's going to sound insane. I thought it was insane when I found out, and Yowhaven probably haven't had weird things happen around you like I did to prove it. I couldn't tell you all this before because it's a secret. And I mean an against the law kind of secret, like the Official Secrets Act. That's the law about James Bond-type stuff in Britain. This isn't the Official Secrets Act, but it's a law like it. The point is it's illegal to tell someone who's not authorized to know about it, and if it turned out Yower and me father, there would have been trouble. I asked my friend Hermione, and she says you're allowed to tell your immediate family. So parents, siblings, and children. Me immediate family, she says. And you can tell your wife or husband if you have one. I don't know what the situation is with you and your girlfriend, but Hermione says if someone lives in the same household long-term, it's okay to tell them. But she doesn't know what long-term means, and also that's the law in Britain, and it might be different in America. And you can't tell your assistant about it unless he lives with you for some reason. So if anyone who's not on that list has been reading this letter, don't let them. Sorry, that all sounds really complicated when I write it out like that, but I needed to make sure you knew the rules. The secretist magic is real. I am a witch, the pointy hats and broomsticks kind. Yes, I do fly on a broomstick. I'm pretty good at it too. But we only wear pointy hats on special occasions. My mum and stepdad were a witch and wizard. A boy witch is a wizard, not a warlock. My school is called Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It's not registered because it's secret, and I guess it only has good prospects with other witches and wizards. It doesn't have phones or computers because magic interferes with electronics. And you can't find it because it's unplottable. That means it magically doesn't show up on maps. There's a whole secret society of witches and wizards and other magical creatures with its own government that's in charge of keeping it all hidden. That's where that law's from. It's called the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy. I know I probably sound mental right now, and I know how you feel. I didn't know magic was real either until last summer. Aunt Petunia knew because my mum was a witch, but Aunt Petunia hates magic, and she hated my mum because of it. So she and Uncle Vernon told me there was no such thing as magic. They were hoping I'd turn out normal muggle and magical, but it didn't work. I wanted to show you some things to prove magic is real, but I didn't have much that fit in the mail tube. I put in a chocolate frog card. Chocolate frogs are sweets that are spelled to hop around for a minute when you open them, and they come with cards with famous witches and wizards on them that people collect. That card is our headmaster, Albus Dumbledore. But the magic part is that the photo moves around. He can even move out of the frame. All magic photos can move like that, and magical portraits paintings can talk too. I also put in a pack of non-explodable luminous balloons, which I guess do exactly what they say, but I haven't tried them though. And there's a F-Whooper feather quill that I got for Christmas. A F-Whooper is a magical bird that looks a bit like a neon-colored owl. According to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, their songs cause insanity. I don't think their quills do anything magical, but I thought maybe it'd be useful. The other pieces of parchment are my Hogwarts acceptance letter. I think it's the only thing I have with the school's coat of arms on it like you wanted, and my inheritance test from Gringotts, the wizard bank. Your first question, how did I know you're my father? I guess the answer is magic. When Hagrid took me to get my school supplies last summer, first of all, on my birthday last summer, Hagrid showed up to deliver my acceptance letter to Hogwarts. That was the first time I found out about magic. Hagrid's the groundskeeper here, and he's huge. Over 10 feet tall for sure, but he's really nice. He told me I was a witch, and I thought it sounded mental, but it was easier for me to believe because he could just show me magic. Also, I had times when I was younger when impossible things happened when I was scared or angry. That's called accidental magic, and it's supposed to be pretty common with little kids. Hagrid took me to get my school supplies. There's a hidden magical shopping district in London called Diagon Alley where we got everything. First, we had to go to Gringotts, the wizard bank, because we use different money, and it's where the money I inherited from my stepdad is. Gringotts is run by goblins. They're not like Lord of the Rings goblins, though. I'm not sure what I'd call them. Those are the only other kind of goblins I know. Lord of the Rings goblins aren't real, I mean. They're just the only ones I know from movies and stuff. Gringotts goblins are about 4 feet tall, and they have big, pointed ears and really long fingers and feet. They're really intimidating even though they're small, honestly. The guards had these big battle axes, too. Anyway, at Gringotts, they said I needed identification to prove I was Harry Potter and not somebody else in disguise. Hagrid wasn't expecting that, so I had to take an inheritance test. It was kind of cool to see. You have to put a few drops of blood into a special inkwell, and then an enchanted quill writes the test results on its own. That's what the other parchment is, and you can see it knew your name and birth date. I don't know how, it just did because it's magic. For my mum and stepdad, it knew their bank records, but it didn't know anything else about you because you're not a Gringotts customer. Sorry, that turned out to be really complicated to explain too, but Gringotts was my source that you're my dad. I was pretty sure they were reliable because Hagrid thought they were, and the banker got upset when I said the inheritance test was wrong. But they didn't know either until I took the test, so they weren't keeping it from me. And they're the bank everyone uses here, so I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I think I know why your paternity test came back looking funny, too. The banker said the paternity record on the Gringotts test meant that James Potter did a magical adoption of me. That's why it says I have two fathers. It's supposed to make me magically a Potter, which is supposed to be important for magical reasons. and the books in the school library say it can give you some features of the person who adopts you, so it might have changed my DNA. Honestly, I was worried it might have changed too much of my DNA for the paternity test to work. I don't know how magic works with DNA. I'm not even sure most wizards even know what DNA is. Ron and Hagrid didn't. I know being a witch or wizard is genetic, though. It's almost always passed down through families. But the adoption wasn't what made me magic. People have tried that before, and it didn't work. Oh, I guess that wasn't your first question earlier. No, the Dursleys didn't make me pay rent. I think they would have if they could, but they just didn't like spending money on me. I was just worried you might have problems about child support or something. I got my scar when my parents died. My mum and stepdad, I mean. That's another long story. Before I was born, there was this evil wizard called Voldemort who was trying to take over magical Britain, and he was killing a lot of people. My mum and stepdad and a lot of their friends fought against him. When I was born, Theo went into hiding, but eventually Voldemort found us. He killed my mum and my stepdad, and he tried to kill me, but something went wrong. His curse backfired and hit him instead, and he was destroyed, and all I got was a scar. It sounds scary, but things are peaceful now, and Hogwarts is definitely safe. They say Professor Dumbledore is the only person Voldemort was ever afraid of, so nobody would mess with us here. But the thing is, it's important because I am famous in the magical world. Really famous. I was the only person who ever survived Voldemort's curse, plus it ended the war, so everyone was really grateful about it. When I visited Diagon Alley, everybody wanted to shake my hand. Nobody knows what really happened, though. They call me the girl who lived like I was the one who did it, but I didn't do anything. I was only a baby. Maybe it was something my parents did, but they still died, so I don't know. That's why I thought you'd know about me if you knew about Owl Post. If you knew about Owl Post, that would mean you were a wizard, and you'd probably know my name, or at least you'd know someone who knew about me. You aren't a wizard, right? If you are, why didn't you know about Hogwarts and all the other stuff? You asked how did Hedwig find you. That's magic, too. She's my owl, and you're my father. According to Hagrid, that's all a post owl needs. I don't know how it works, but they just know where to go even if they've never been there before. The only way she couldn't find you is if you used magic to hide yourself, or if you lived more than a day's flight from land, like in St. Helena. I can ask the teachers about it, but they might just say it's magic. I don't know if there's anything you can do about the security thing, but you shouldn't have any other witches or wizards writing to you. Maybe you can set up something like a wizard P.O. box, but even if you can, I don't know where you could in New York. And I don't know why owls, if they're extra magical or if it's just tradition. I think Hedwig understands me too, so maybe they're smarter than regular owls. But everyone uses owl post in the magical world. They're the only way post comes in at Hogwarts, and they make good pets for witches and wizards, even if they don't. Formigals and magic muggles are what we call non-magic people. It sounds kind of funny, but that's what everyone calls them, even people like Hermione, whose parents are muggles. My other friend Ron says I technically count as muggle-born too, because all my grandparents were muggles, but only prats like Draco Malfoy, whose families have been magic for who knows how many generations will care. Ron's family is all wizards, but he doesn't care. By the way, I thought you ought to know it sounds weird when you call Hedwig a good-looking bird, even though she is. In Britain, if you say good-looking bird, it sounds like you're talking about a woman. Yes, I really am at school. I'm sorry, I don't have anything better than my acceptance letter to prove it, and you won't be able to look it up either. I didn't know about the kitty-kitty-little tarlady school thing, but Hermione says Hogwarts will give you a diploma that's good in the muggle world that says it's from some obscure school, and she reckons they rotate them every few years because it's more believable if the trail ends in a school that closed. Hermione also says muggle-borns and their families are supposed to get an introduction to the magical world from a teacher when they get their acceptance letters. But I didn't because Hagrid thought I'd already know everything from Aunt Petunia. So I guess that's the story with Hogwarts not being registered. It's part of the secret. You can get a Muggle diploma if you need one, but I think most people stay and work in the magical world. That's probably why my parents didn't have any others' records, too. And Hagrid says Hogwarts is the best magic school in the world, so I'm not worried about getting a good education. I don't know where Hogwarts is. I think it's in the north, even for Scotland. I think we passed the Great Glen on the train ride up here. But it's unplottable, so it won't show up on a map. The nearest town is Hogsmeade, but that's an all-wizard village, and it's also unplottable. Students aren't allowed to go there until third year. I don't know what the nearest Muggle town is. I guess the train tracks have to connect back to London, but we get to the train through what I'm pretty sure is an unplottable train platform. Platform 9 and 34 at King's Cross. Being unplottable might also be why you couldn't find my parents' house, but it also might have been destroyed when Voldemort attacked us. I'm not sure about that bit. Hogwarts isn't Bruderhof or anything like that. It's not a religious school, and it's definitely not a cult. My mum went here because she was a witch. But like Isid wrote, electronics don't work here because there's too much magic interfering, so there's not much technology. There's no electricity. The lighting is all torches and fireplaces. We use gas burners in potions class, but everything else uses wood, I think, and candles. There's a wizarding wireless radio station, but that runs on magic, and there's nothing like the telly or computers. The clocks are mechanical, and Dean Thomas said his battery-powered watch stopped working when he came here. I haven't seen the kitchens or the laundry, but those probably run all on magic too. We have indoor plumbing, though. That's all the same as Muggle plumbing, except with no electronic sensors. We still use quills and parchment for writing. That's not me being fancy. Wizards don't ever use pens, even though they could. I think that might just be tradition. It takes some getting used to. Yes, we do wear uniforms. They're kind of like Muggle school uniforms, but with wizardy robes over top of them. Hogwarts is great, and yes, I feel safe here. It's way better than the Dursleys, for sure. I can speak my mind and question me teachers most of my teachers. Snape, the potions teacher, is a complete arse. He's really, really unpleasant. He'll take points for no reason, especially from me, and he always favors Slytherin's own house over ours. And Professor Binns, the history teacher, is a ghost, and he's really boring, so no one bothers speaking up in his class. All the others are okay, though, and they don't mind answering questions. The only rule for talking to people outside the school is the statute of secrecy. Otherwise, it's just a normal school. They have normal punishments like detentions and taking house points. There's a contest between the houses to get the most points by the end of the year. You get points for things like being good at lessons and winning Quidditch sports matches and stuff, and you can lose points if you get in trouble. Madame Pomfrey is the matron in the infirmary. She's not technically a doctor, she's a mediwitch, and Ron says wizards don't have doctors. We have healers, but not faith healers. He also thinks doctors are nutters who cut people up. Madame Pomfrey is really good, though. Neville Longbottom broke his wrist in our first flying lesson, and she mended it in just a few hours. I guess I don't know what they do for big emergencies. The part about using a radio to call for help wasn't true. There aren't any phone-saw Muggle radios at Hogwarts. I'm sorry for lying, but I couldn't tell you it was magic yet. There's no direct way of talking with someone at a distance that I know of in the magical world, but wizards can fly, and Hogsmeade's right down the road, so they can get help fast. And there might be other ways to talk to people I don't know about yet. I guess I should have asked about that. I know that's a lot of stuff, but I don't know what else to tell you. There's so much else I could say about Hogwarts. What else do you want to know? I hope that answered all your questions. I know all the stuff about Hogwarts and magic isn't what you were expecting, but it's the best place I've ever been. Love, Harley P.S. Can you send me a photo of you to go with the ones of my mum, please? Thanks. Chapter 38, 31 January Roman 3, Testing Logs. Excerpts from testing logs filed under Project Glinda, transcriber's note. The logs were not labeled with Project Glinda until after recording was finished. Location: Stark Tower, Mr. Stark's personal laboratory on floor 85. Date: Tuesday, January 31, 2012. Day 1, Test 1 video. Mr. Stark is sitting at a workbench with the contents of Holly's latest delivery laid out in front of him. U is recording. Laboratory logs indicate Ms. Potts is watching from out of frame. Mr. Stark: Day 1, Test 1. My daughter claims magic is real, and she decided to send me some random stuff to prove it. So, pause. So before I call a shrink for her, I figure I'd better test it to see if it's real, and if it turns out it is real, I definitely want to document it, and I'll start with these non-explodable luminous balloons. Those should be pretty easy to tell if they work as advertised. Mr. Stark opens the packet of balloons and picks out one of them. To the camera, it appears indistinguishable from an ordinary party balloon. He picks up a compressed air hose and attaches the balloon to it, albeit without fasteners or adhesives. Mr. Stark: Jarvis, record pressure. Jarvis: Yes, sir. Mr. Stark starts the airflow. The balloon inflates normally, however, it begins glowing with increasing brightness midway through the process. The origin of the glow is not evident. Mr. Stark stops the airflow. Mr. Stark: Well, that's different. Ms. Potts: It glows, at least. Any idea what could do that? Mr. Stark: Could be a bunch of things. Reaction to stretching the rubber, maybe. Mr. Stark resumes the airflow. The balloon continues inflating and stops expanding at a normal size. However, the air continues flowing unobstructed, and the glow continues to brighten as the pressure increases. At an overpressure of 29 kPa, 4.5 psi, the balloon flies off the end of the hose. It propels itself around the lab at a significantly higher speed than a normal party balloon. Transcriber's note: While reliable data are limited, it appears that a representative pressure level for an ordinary party balloon is approximately 5 kPa, 0.8 psi, with a burst pressure of 8 kPa, 1.3 psi. Ms. Potts: Is that what it does instead of popping? Mr. Stark: No, that was me not expecting to need such a firm grip. Try that again. Test 2. Test 2 video. Mr. Stark removes another balloon from the packet and repeats the same experimental procedure, keeping a firmer grip on the air hose. The balloon behaves similarly to the previous one. The color of the glow of each balloon is different, matching the color of the latex. The glow continues to brighten approximately linearly with increasing pressure. Mr. Stark watches it with increasing surprise. The overpressure far exceeds the tensile strength of all common latex and latex analog materials. Models indicate unpredictable effects of continuing to increase the pressure. A warning flag is raised at an overpressure of 200 kPa, 29 psi. Jarvis: Sir, for pressure vessel testing, I recommend additional safety precau alert. Audio error. Ms. Potts: Startled. Mr. Stark wobbles after being knocked back by the balloon bursting in his face. Mr. Stark: Definitely not non-explodable. Jarvis: Report. Jarvis: The balloon burst at an overpressure of 237 kilopascals. I estimate it has approximately 25 times the tensile strength of natural latex. High-speed footage was captured successfully. Mr. Stark: Show me. The video screen displays the critical moments of the recording. The balloon bursts in a manner similar to a football or other inflatable ball with an internal cloth layer. A rip opens in one side across approximately half of its diameter, with the air blowing out of the resulting hole instead of tearing the entire balloon into pieces. Additionally, at no point did the neck of the balloon inflate, as would be the case with natural latex. Ms. Potts: That's definitely not a normal balloon. Mr. Stark: 25 times natural latex. Mr. Stark picks up the remains of the balloon and stretches it by hand. It appears to stretch normally up to the limits of its elasticity, where it stops suddenly. Mr. Stark: How does that compare with other polymers? Kevlar. Jarvis: Far below Kevlar, so modestly below nylon monofilament. still comparable to low-grade steel alloys. Mr. Stark, yeah, except steel doesn't Darthize. Mr. Stark stretches the balloon 2 more times. Ms. Potts, you think it's some exotic polymer. If Harley's school is technology-free, they wouldn't have that. Mr. Stark, no, but that doesn't rule some of the other scenarios. And it's kind of false advertising on the balloons. Ms. Potts, I don't know about that. That was close to 30 psi. It definitely wouldn't have popped under normal conditions. Mr. Stark, test 3 video. Mr. Stark, test 3 puncture test. Mr. Stark holds up a third balloon inflated with the neck tied off, glowing brightly. The pressure gauge indicated an overpressure of 16 kPa, 2.6 psi, during inflation. Mr. Stark attempts to stab the balloon with a pen. The pen deforms the balloon, but slides off the edge before puncturing it. Mr. Stark places the balloon against the table and attempts to drive the pen down through it. The balloon deforms further, allowing the pen tip to descend much of the way down to the table. Mr. Stark removes the pen and looks at the balloon in surprise, noting the ink dot on its surface. Mr. Stark, well, that's a little more interesting. Mr. Stark looks around the workbench and picks up a utility knife. He attempts to pierce the balloon with the knife point. However, the rubber still deforms without puncturing. Ms. Potts, that shouldn't happen, should it? Mr. Stark, I don't think so. Mr. Stark raises the utility knife high and drives it down rapidly in a stabbing motion. Mr. Stark, dramatically. Here, Ms. Potts, flinching. Watch it. The knife appears to bounce off the balloon, still without puncturing it. Mr. Stark, no, that's definitely wrong. Even Kevlar wouldn't stand up to that if it was that thin, and it should have stood up to a lot higher pressure if it's that strong. Mr. Stark presses the knife point back into the balloon and leans in to examine it more closely. Ms. Potts, any idea how it's doing that? Mr. Stark, pause. It's hard to tell with the glow, but I think the rubber is just form-fitting around the knife, which it might do if it wasn't under any pressure. Pause. One more idea. Mr. Stark puts the knife down and points at one of the tool cabinets. Mr. Stark, Pepper, get the infrared sensor out of that drawer, would you? Ms. Potts retrieves the sensor from the cabinet and holds it up. Ms. Potts, this one. Mr. Stark, that's the one. Bring it over here now. Ms. Potts enters the frame, holding an infrared temperature sensor. Mr. Stark ensures that it is lined up with the balloon and recording. Mr. Stark, thanks. Mr. Stark picks up a hot soldering iron and presses it into the balloon. It initially has no visible effect. However, the sensor indicates a rapid increase in the temperature of the latex. After 5 seconds of contact, a hole opens in the balloon around the soldering iron. As in the previous test, the hole does not expand to the full size of the balloon. The balloon deflates rapidly, but not rapidly enough to cause the sonic boom of a normal popping sound. Ms. Potts, hesitantly. So, would you call that not an explosion? Mr. Stark, you could probably get away with saying that. Mr. Stark puts the soldering iron down. He picks up the utility knife again and attempts to cut the deflated balloon. This time, it cuts as easily as natural latex. Mr. Stark, shocked. What? Mr. Stark cuts the latex again. Mr. Stark, still shocked. What the hell? This stuff was practically vibranium a minute ago. Ms. Potts, pause. What does that mean? Mr. Stark is silent for 12 seconds with a bewildered expression on his face. Ms. Potts, Tony, Mr. Stark's expression shifts to one of excitement. Mr. Stark, I think it means magic is real and I'm going to science it out. Chapter 39. 31 January Roman 4. Project Logs. Excerpts from logs for Project Glinda, descriptions of items and related notes received Tuesday, January 31, 2012. Transcriber's note. These logs were compiled from a mixture of notes by Mr. Stark, Ms. Potts, and Jarvis. Item 1. 9-inch party balloons, pack of 12. Advertised as non-explodable and luminous. Packaging superficially similar to normal party balloons, but does not match any known brand. Balloons come in red, yellow, green, and blue. Glow when inflated in proportion to pressure, even beyond the expansion limit. Source unknown. Resist most attempts to puncture them, but only when inflated. Completely inconsistent from any known polymer, even with exotic impact hardening or similar properties. Magically protected against popping, but not other damage. How is it determined what kind of damage counts? Protection fails and pops semi-normally at high pressure, 2 bar. Limit of strength of magic. Wild inconsistency in strength based on conditions. Would be very hard to impossible to replicate. Not sure why anyone would do it deliberately. Chemical composition based on Raman spectrometer. Polyisoprene, main constituent of natural rubber, various common dyes, evidence of various unidentified additives. Nothing obviously enhanced, but don't know what to look for. Glow spectrum, identical to uninflated spectrum, but brighter. Possible with various kinds of luminescence, but doesn't match the material. Microscopy, not attempted. Item 2, quill pen made from a large, bright pink feather, total length 24.3 cm, 9.5 in. Feather from a bird of unknown species, claimed to be a F-whooper, possibly an owl relative. Shaft cut in a manner matching historical quill pens, lightly used. An ebony grip has been added. Ink stains on the tip. Chemical composition based on Raman spectrometer. Feather contains beta-keratin, main structural component of natural feathers, carotenoid pigments, and porphyrin pigments. No artificial dyes detected. Grip contains cellulose and lignin wood fibers and hydrocarbons indicating an unidentified wood finish. Carotenoids normal for pink birds like flamingos. Porphyrins found in owl feathers and fluoresce pink under UV light. Color profile doesn't match any known bird, but data is limited. Microscopy. Feather has a fringed edge, found in owls and a few other nocturnal birds. Does not have the velvet surface texture of owl feathers. Close relative. Transitional form, likely more tolerant to rain. Aside, how does Hedwig handle rain? Owls are supposed to get waterlogged easily. Need a protein sequence on the keratin to trace its genetics. Don't have the right equipment in the tower. Item 3. Chocolate frog trading card. Laminated cardboard, pentagonal, similar in size to a baseball card, featuring Albus Dumbledore, Harley's school's headmaster. Pictured. Photograph of an old man with bright blue eyes, a long, crooked nose, long silver hair, and a long beard extending past the bottom of the frame. Wearing a burgundy robe, burgundy nightcap-type hat, and half-moon glasses. Photograph labeled. Albus Dumbledore text on reverse side reads, Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts, considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times. Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling. Albus Dumbledore. Name listed in SSR files and captured Hydra files from WW2 as an allied agent, but no agency is listed in any file. No debriefings or Rs included, only outcomes of engagements, almost always successful. No reference photo included, but written description lists blue eyes, a long, crooked nose, shoulder-length red hair and beard, and complaints about his choice of clothing. Dumbledore, noted as a rare to non-existent surname. Only other search result is a marriage announcement for a Percival and Kendra Dumbledore from 1897. Possible that more records are available, but not digitized, given his age. Grindelwald. Possible id as Gellert Grindelwald, listed in Hydra files as a Hydra ally of uncertain provenance. Last known sighting, December 1944. No reference photo or description, but an insignia is included, an equilateral triangle inscribed with a circle and bisected by a line. No match to any WW2 unit or agency insignia. No other public or semi-public records found. Only other search results for name Grindelwald are place names. Possible pseudonym Nicholas Flamel. Historical figure, lived c. 1330-1418. Became famous in his lifetime as a wealthy scrivener and philanthropist. Later histories and modern fantasy literature named him as an alchemist and ascribed immortality to him, but the earliest historical record of such was from 1612. Wait, that sounds like Nicholas Flamel is an alchemist and is still alive, or it's a descendant, or a pseudonym. Not sure why someone would do that, though. Something doesn't add up. Would Dumbledore look that old if he had the Philosopher's Stone? Dragon. Presumably a literal fire-breathing dragon. Query started to correlate claimed historical sightings and depictions. Physical description of card. Photo on card moves through simple action cycles, at times smiling, staring in pensive thought, scratching his nose, walking in and out of frame, etc. Similar actions are not identical and show slight variations each time they are performed. Actions changed throughout the day, including adding yawning in the evening hours. Photo appeared to spend much of the night sleeping with head bowed despite still being in a standing posture. Photo does not respond to sound, does not respond to light while in sleeping pose. Actions appear to be performed in discrete units a few seconds long. Sequence of actions and variations appears true random. Chemical composition based on Raman spectrometer. Cellulose, calcium carbonate, a common coating in glossy paper. Various dyes of unknown composition. Microscopy. High-speed video micrography appears to show the ink flowing over the cardboard fibers. Mechanism unknown. How? Both e-paper and color-changing animals realign pigment particles in place. This is a completely different mechanism, even more convincing than the balloons. Evaporation, capillary action, viscosity should all make it impossible. Maybe seal the moisture in and control the capillary action somehow. Tunable adhesive properties. Responds differently to different dyes. Is any of that possible? Need to read up more on materials science. How does it even keep the colors from bleeding together? How does this work? Item 4. Letter from Harry Potter addressed to Tony Stark. India ink on parchment scroll, total length 2.18 meters, 7 feet, 2 inches, written with a quill pen. Added to list of magic items after noticing the scroll had no seams. Identification dubious. Standard practice for scrolls is sheets glued together, but could make natural parchment that large if desired. No visible magic features. Chemical composition based on Raman spectrometer, consistent with animal skin. Ink contains carbon black. No exotic dyes detected. Microscopy not attempted. Genetic analysis of parchment sequenced by clinic lab under secrecy protocol. It's from a cow.